Releasing Trauma is sponsored by the Global Association for Trauma Recovery. The Global Association for Trauma Recovery is a social impact organization serving as a resource for survivors and their families, dedicated to facilitating change by spreading trauma-related awareness and thus creating a more trauma-informed world. Learn more at gaftr.org. Welcome to Releasing Trauma, a Survivor's Podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. I am a survivor of emotional bullying, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and grief. After losing my husband in 2019, I set off on a new adventure to help other women release their trauma and create a life they can cherish. Each week, I will feature a guest expert or a survivor to share their stories, tips, wisdom, and more. The goal is so that you can take away even just the smallest nugget of information you can use in your life right now to make a change, and to remind you that you're not alone. There is life after trauma, and you can move from victim to thriver and create a life you can cherish. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. With me today is Dr. Debi Silber, and we're going to be talking about betrayal trauma and how it impacts not only you, but your relationships, you at the workplace, your whole life, really. So, Dr. Silber, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much. You can call me Debbie.
Okay, awesome. I usually ask that in the green room, but I totally forgot.
That's okay.
That's all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Debbie, I usually have our guests start out with telling us a little bit about their story. So why don't you tell us about you?
Sure. Well, I don't think anybody says, I think I want to study the topic of betrayal.
Right?
It doesn't happen. So, it's actually my 30th year in business, and as life would morph and change, so would business. And then I had a really painful betrayal from my family. I thought I did what I needed to do to heal. And then a couple of years later, it happened again. This time it was my husband. Blindsided, devastated. I just hurt, shocked, everything you feel when that happens.
Sure.
So got him out of the house, and I was like, okay, what's similar to these two experiences besides me? And I realized I really never took my boundaries, never took my needs seriously. Boundaries were getting crossed. And I said, something drastic has to change here. And so here it was. I had 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business, and I enrolled in a PhD program. It was in transpersonal psychology. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just felt so called to do this program. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my work, my family, my life.
Well, I think the listeners are saying the same thing I am. What are these 3 discoveries? We want to know.
Sure. Well, the first one was because originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And so for those who aren't familiar with post-traumatic growth, if you imagine kind of an upside of trauma, how trauma, whatever it is, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, leaves you with a new awareness, perspective, insight you didn't have. And I thought to myself, I've been through death of a loved one. I've actually been through disease. And I was like, but betrayal feels so different. I didn't want to assume. So I asked all my study participants, and I said, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. And here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the whole self has to be rebuilt. Rejection, abandonment, confidence, worthiness, belonging, trust, they're all shattered and they all have to be rebuilt. So I felt like it didn't quite qualify as post-traumatic growth. It was like post-traumatic growth plus rebuilding the self. So I coined a new term, which is now called post-betrayal transformation. So that's the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal. That was the first one.
Wow. That's a big one.
Yeah, it is different. And it's certainly not to say which trauma is better, which trauma is worse. They all stink. But it's just that betrayal is unique in that it feels like such a personal attack. You know, if you lose, like, for example, I lost my mom, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss, you don't necessarily take it personally, you know.
Right.
It's the personal nature of it. That's why the self needs to be rebuilt. So yeah, so that was the first one. You want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So the second one was, this was really interesting too, that there's actually a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's now known as post-betrayal syndrome. And we have the post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent people are struggling. I mean, we must have 30,000 people take it by now. And what's so interesting is we've all heard time heals all wounds. I have the proof. When it comes to betrayal, that's simply not true. There's a question that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago, I'm unwilling to trust again. My betrayal happened 20 years ago, it's still with me. You know, my betrayal happened 15 years ago, feels like it happened yesterday. So we know completely moving through betrayal takes a very specific and different protocol. So that was the second one. And I even have, every once in a while, I pull the stats from the quiz to just to see where people land. And I'm happy to share some statistics if you'd like.
I would love to hear those. I'm really interested in this.
Sure. So this is out of roughly 25,000, 30,000 people. So 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. 94% deal with painful triggers. I mean, 94%, right?
Yeah.
These are the most common physical symptoms. 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. So you hear your adrenals crashing. Right. 47% have weight changes. And in the beginning, it could be you can't hold food down. Later on, you're using food for comfort. 45% have digestive issues. That's anything from Crohn's, IBS, constipation, diarrhea, diverticulitis, you name it. The most common mental symptoms, 78% are overwhelmed, 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief, 68% are unable to focus, 64% are in shock, and 62% are unable to concentrate. So just imagine you can't concentrate, you have a gut issue, you're exhausted, and you're supposed to work and raise your kids and everything else you're supposed to do. That's not even the emotional ones. 88% extreme sadness. 83% are angry, 82% are hurt, 80% have anxiety, 79% are stressed. Here's why I wrote the book, Trust Again. 84% have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
Wow. I wish I could say that those numbers are shocking, but they're not.
I know.
Sadly,
I know.
Sadly, they're not. If anything, it would be shocking that they're not higher.
Yeah.
That's just, it's crazy, but it's the way trauma works.
Yeah. The good thing is you could heal from all of it.
Yes.
And that leads to the third discovery, if you want me to share that one.
Sure.
Okay. So this one, when this happened, like in the geekiest way, I thought my head was going to fly right off my body. I mean, this one was, to me, the most exciting of them all. And it's this. While we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many of us do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean coming in with symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome to that full and complete state of post-betrayal transformation. If we go from one to the other, we will move through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we even know what happens at each stage, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And we know what it takes and what we need to do to move from one stage to the next. So why is that good news? Healing's predictable. If someone's willing to do what it takes to move from one stage to the next, they will predictably move through all the stages. And I'm happy to share the stages if you want.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about those. Because I know the listeners are like, well, what are these stages and how do I do this? How do I heal?
Yeah. And I mapped them all out in trust again. It's what we teach within the PBT Institute, Post Betrayal Transformation Institute. But I'm going to give you a distilled version right here.
Perfect.
So stage one, if you can imagine like a setup stage, and I saw this with every study participant, me too. If you imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental and kind of neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. What does that look like? Looks like we're really good at thinking and doing and not really prioritizing the feeling and being. That doesn't mean if you're just thinking and doing, you will be betrayed. It was just what I saw from everybody. Stage 2, by far the scariest stage. And this is shock, trauma. Here's where you're blindsided, D-Day, Discovery Day. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. So here, you've just ignited the stress response. So you are headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, and disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. This makes no sense. You can't even wrap your mind around the information you just learned. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that prevent chaos. Don't go there. This person's safe, like the rules of your life. And in a moment, every rule you've ever had has just been shattered. The bottom has truly bottomed out on you right here. And a new bottom hasn't shown up. So it's terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything and everything you could to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Who can I trust? Where do I go? How do I feed my kids? Like, it's that practical. But here's the trap. This is the stage that we get stuck in, that most people get stuck in. And I'm not kidding, for life. And here's why. Once you've figured out how to survive, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came from, you're like, whew, okay, all right, we got this. We can, we're good. And we have no idea there's a stage 4 and stage 5 waiting for us. So we're planting roots right here, and 4 things happen. The first thing is you start getting these small self benefits. You get to be right. You get your story. You get someone to blame. You get a target for your anger. You don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Do I trust you? Can I trust you? Forget it. I'm not trusting anybody. And so you start planting deeper roots. You're not supposed to be here long, but you don't know that. So you start planting roots here. And then the next thing happens and your mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you deserved it. Maybe you're not all that. Maybe this, maybe that, right? Deeper roots. Now, because like energy attracts like energy, and this is where you are longer than you're supposed to be, situations and circumstances and relationships are coming towards you to confirm, yep, this is where you belong. And the misery loves company crowd comes around now too. So you start planting deeper roots. Now, it gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but you have no idea there's anything better, right here is where you start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, right? To numb, avoid, distract yourself from what's painful to feel or face. So think about it. You do that for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I'm not kidding. I can see someone 20 years out, Tracy, and I can say, that emotional eating you're doing, or that drinking you're doing, or that numbing in front of the TV you're doing, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. And they would say, it happened 20 years ago. But do you see? All they did was put themselves in a stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah. And that's what we do. You want me to go on to stage 4 and stage 5?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So If we're willingness is the biggest word here, willing to let go of the small self benefits and everything you get from it and grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things you need to do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo my betrayal, but I can control what I do with it. And I always use the example of, if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff's not all there. It's not quite cozy yet, but it's going to be okay. And when you're in this position, you're not healing just yet, but at least you're turning down the stress response and you stopped the massive damage you were causing in stages 2 and stage 3. And what's also so interesting about stage 4 is, think about this. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you, right? Like, you don't take the things that don't represent who you want to be in your new office, apartment, whatever. Well, what I found was, if your friends weren't there for you, right here is where you've outgrown them. You don't take them from stage 3 to stage 4. I saw that consistently. So when you're in stage 4, you're making it cozy, you're making it your new mental home, you're settling into it, you can move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and it's healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal, self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't really have the bandwidth for that earlier, now you do. The mind starts to heal. You're making new rules, you're making new boundaries based on your experience. And you have a new worldview, a new mental model based on what you see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was just all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
So our table's no longer wobbly.
That's it. Exactly.
Wow. I know we covered a lot, listeners. So I will make sure that I have Debi's information linked to her book and all of that, so that you can go get her book and, go through these stages and reread all of it, on your own time. So, we get stuck in these ruts, and I think we get comfortable in them. It's our uncomfortable comfort zone,
Yeah.
So how do we push ourselves out of that?
Yeah. And the first thing is to acknowledge that that's where you are. And it's tough to see, but there's some benefit we're getting from staying stuck. So we really have to acknowledge it. But I actually have these 4 questions, and I invite everybody to write them down. That's my way of saying write them down. Ready? So the first question is, am I numbing, avoiding, distracting? If so, how? Call yourself on it, because you will stay stuck if you're doing these things. So call yourself on it. Do you walk into the kitchen and you reach into the cabinets? You're not the least bit hungry. You're just trying to, numb yourself. Do you walk into a room and you put the TV on because you are desperately trying to drown out the sound of your own thoughts, right? Call yourself on it. The second question, what am I pretending not to see? Face it, right? What am I pretending not to see? Am I pretending not to see there's trouble in my relationship? Am I pretending not to see I hate my job? Am I pretending not to see that health issue that desperately needs my attention? The third question, what's life going to look like in 5 to 10 years if I keep this going? And we don't like to play it out, but you need to play it full out. Keep that relationship issue exactly the way it is. Ignore it. Play it out in 5 to 10 years. What's it going to look like? Right? Or that work issue or that business issue. And then the fourth question, what could life look like in 5 to 10 years if I change now? I'm not saying that change is easy, but transformation begins when we tell ourselves the truth.
Absolutely. Because, I think of everybody in our circles, we lie to ourselves the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Constantly on a daily basis for some of us. And so, yeah, when you start to face that truth, it's like, wow, okay,
Exactly.
kind of opens your eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we know what we're working with.
Right.
And that's the thing. We can't change what we're unaware of. So awareness is key here. And there were actually 3 groups in the study who did not heal. And it reminds me of it just based on what you just said. One of them it was a group who just refused to accept their betrayal. They just weren't having it. The second group was that group that was numbing, avoiding, distracting, and it may have made the day a bit easier to get through, but not without a price. They ran to the doctor who put them on a mood stabilizer or anti-anxiety medication, or they numbed, they started emotionally eating. And I get it, it made the day tolerable, but it really kept their healing at bay. The third group was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, religious reasons, that was a big one. Whatever the reason was, they just did all they could just to try to put it behind them, turn the other cheek, whatever it was. Right. I only saw two things with this group. One, a further deterioration of the relationship. And number two, this group was the most physically sick.
I believe it.
Yeah, your broken heart just can't handle that. So that was consistent.
Yeah, I believe that because we take all of that in to our bodies on a cellular level. And like you mentioned earlier, it creates Crohn's and digestive issues and all kinds of chaos.
Exactly. And if you have a broken heart and you're not being treated with the level of love or acknowledgement or respect, or you're not being valued, I mean, it's just it causes a lot of stress on the body and the heart.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And you've got to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing, or only way to move forward is to let it go. Yeah. Well, Debi, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I could talk to you forever. Your energy is awesome. So thank you so much for coming on and, and sharing all this information with us. It's been very eye-opening.
So thank you. And I just recommend, everybody take the post-betrayal syndrome quiz just to see to what extent you're still struggling. They could just find that at, thepbtinstitute.com/quiz. This way they'll see where they land.
Okay, perfect. And again, listeners, we'll have all that information down below. I strongly encourage you to grab a copy of Debi's book and take that betrayal quiz. Thank you.
And if they're going to grab the book, I'd love to give you a link, because this way they get all kinds of goodies when they do.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So instead of, you'll find it on Amazon, but go here first. So this way you can get the bonuses. So it's thepbtinstitute.com/trust again.
Okay. Awesome. I'll write that down so I can remember, put that in the show notes.
You're going to get the book, might as well get the goodies.
Right. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, listeners. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you in the next show.